So how are leadership strategies applied and how do they impact on the organisation's direction?
So leadership strategies are, generally speaking, communicated down through a fairly dense hierarchy. They do impact on the organisation's direction. I think, again, because of the scale of our operation, it can take a long time for change to cascade. So it would be unusual if, I mean, it would be unusual and slightly worrying if we took a complete U-turn in terms of what our strategies are or how we wanted to deliver, which hasn't happened yet, fortunately. But if we were to do that, I still think there would be quite a lot of I'm trying to think of the right word, manoeuvring that's required in order for the understanding of not just what that strategy means day to day, but also why that strategy has changed and what else that could possibly mean in order for it to actually take root.
So is there a particular sort of leader that you need in the organisation?
Yes, a brave one. One of the things I love actually about Rolls-Royce is they have some relatively new behaviours that have been launched. It was about 18 months or so ago, I think, and they're called their ABCs. This is where I can't remember them. A is for agility, B is for bravery, C is for collaboration, and S is for simplicity. And actually, in a VUCA environment, which we all are, those aspects, I think, those behaviours are genuinely what is required in order for change to happen and for us to be able to respond to what the market is doing now and what the market will be doing going forward. So I think because of the legacy of the organisation and because of the structure and the hierarchy, etc., seeing those every day is less regular. And so either finding externally or allowing people internally to operate in that way and rewarding it in the right way, I think would then generate the type of leaders that we need. And I do think agile, brave, collaborative, and I won't say simple, but who can keep things simple is really important.
So, and if I can just, and I wasn't sure about what the VUCA environment is, remind me.
So volatile, uncertain, complex and ambiguous.
Okay, so,
I remember that too.
So the challenge, so remind me again, so the challenge of working in a volatile, uncertain, complex.
I think one of the certainly, and forgive me, my background being in talent, I always end up going to the people stuff, but the core challenge that is facing a number of businesses now is that the previous training or leadership or learning and development process or programs or activity that organisations felt that they needed to give their people or offer to their people were primarily designed to facilitate moves up a fairly clearly linear or clear linear career path. What we're finding is that because the wider environment is moving so quickly, is developing so quickly, developing people for what was right 5 years ago or is right now for the position above them won't necessarily equip them with what they need to be successful when they then actually move.
I see.
And so the aspects that we're now trying to develop in people are less specific skills and more skills that will enable them to learn regardless of what that environment gives them or puts their way. So learning agility, for example, the ability to be put into a different context or different situation, learn quickly, ask questions, be curious. They're the things that we're trying to develop in people so that regardless of what comes their way, they are in a good space.
Excellent, thank you very much. So could you describe the culture of the business?
I can. It's difficult, and the reason I'm smiling is because I think it's still a legacy culture at the moment, and I think they are trying to change the culture, but because that takes so long, you don't necessarily again see that in all facets of the organisation. I would say the business as I see now, the culture is traditional, quite hierarchical, which everyone always takes as a negative thing, and it isn't necessarily. In some areas it creates bureaucracy, in other areas actually it allows for really clear line of sight of responsibility, it allows for quick escalation, and it's, I guess where we're trying to work out is where that positive hierarchy is working and where the negative side of it isn't, and what needs to change there. I would say it's an organisation with heart. They are, sounds really cheesy, but they are an organisation who do genuinely like looking after their people. And I think they find it quite hard where there are commercial decisions to be made and people decisions to be made, and the two are in competition. And careful, I think, because they will need to, because of what we do, we put people in the air, we want to protect them. So that aspect of care, of consideration, of making absolutely sure filters down across the whole organisation. The responsibility that we feel is felt across the whole organisation.
Very interesting. So next question is talking about change. So when change has occurred, how does the organisation approach it?
So in terms of approach from enacting that change, they will more and more they will look to engage externally with consultants from an advisory perspective, partly because the insight that external consultants can provide to what else is going on in the market, and crucially what's gone wrong in the market for other people, is invaluable and gives us confidence that we're doing things that are going to allow us to be successful.
So this is getting external consultants to give a view on the company?
Yeah, and to give a view on the company in the context of the industry or our competitors or a completely different set of organisations, if that's what we so wish.
Yes.
From a how is change dealt with perspective, I think with reticence is the honest answer, with a little bit of suspicion. It's been such a static organisation for so long, as in and a secure organisation and a solid organisation, that there has been a cacophony of change really over the last 3, 4, 5 years, and there's a level of fatigue with that, I would say.
So people are busy and tired with change?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So at a strategic level, how are decisions made and communicated?
So I would say actually at a strategic level, decisions are made in a very similar way to the way that they're made elsewhere in the organisation, which is through consensus and collaboration. Sometimes too much. I think from a strategic perspective, there are times where we would really benefit from not incorporating everyone's view, or not taking the level of time we take to incorporate everyone's view. But then at other levels in the organisation, the communication of that and the opportunity for people to add their input into that is what creates engagement, where we actually then see things being acted out. So perhaps at a strategic level, we could perhaps do with a little bit more focus, or clarity is the wrong word, but I think focus. Whereas the way of making decisions and communicating them further down the organisation actually really works.
So, in a very large, complicated organisation with so many people, is there a challenge in getting decisions made and a strategy communicated to people?
Yes. Decisions, one of the most common challenges that I come across in my role, because my role is purely project and programme led, it is global. Every single project I work on is global. And the vast majority of projects I work on are cross-functional and multifunctional, to deliver to 3 different sets of businesses with 3 different sets of priorities, etc. The most difficult thing, from my perspective, is pinpointing who the decision maker is for each piece of the project, how they like those decisions to be presented to them, and how they will make those decisions in what timescale. It's quite an alien thing for roles to be that prescriptive, especially up front in a project, but without that, because there is this focus on collaboration and consensus, pace gets lost.
Okay. Very interesting. So what would you say are the most communication... That didn't make sense.
The irony of it being a communication question.
There is an
We're going
irony.
to move past, yeah.
Let me rephrase that. So what are the most effective communication strategies, do you think, in the organisation?
So I wouldn't necessarily say that it's a strategy, but I would say the activity that works the best is getting people in a room together, which is virtually impossible in the context that we're in. But because of that, because we are so well digitally set up to be a global team, you know, I live in the Netherlands and I work for a site in Derby, you know, predominantly. There is, it means that a lot of our interaction is over the phone or over Skype or occasionally FaceTime, things like that. The rarity of that face-to-face interaction makes it more valuable, always. Yeah. But actually, the value of that interaction is the unintended communication, the communication that happens without, not necessarily without purpose, but to give you a practical example, I was running we're reviewing our onboarding experience as a programme of work at the moment. And there are a number of different projects that sit into that. There are 13 different teams who all sit within business services that have responsibilities or actions or activities that sit within that process. Okay. With multiple different systems, etc., etc. I got a number of people over a series of facilitated sessions in a room together to talk about pain points, not solutions, difficult to rein people back from the solutions, but to just talk about what is wrong from different customer viewpoints and why are those things there, so that we can start establishing root causes. Now, ostensibly, and as it happens quite handily, the outcomes were going to be a consistent understanding of where our pain points were, a clarification of what the root cause issues are, so that when we're creating solutions, we can have a bigger impact earlier, because those solutions feed into more than one pain point at a time. The unwritten benefit of those sessions was that actually one of our biggest challenges and biggest root causes is that we don't know what each other do, because there isn't that visibility and interaction between those teams. They operate very much in silo. And so my favourite piece of feedback from the day was the person who came up to me afterwards and said, this has made me realise, actually, I don't understand my colleagues. I understand my customers, but I don't understand my colleagues.
Gosh.
So from a communication point of view, that's what I would say I see as being most effective. It's just not perhaps, I don't think it's always realised that that's the case.
So it's something that's very valuable to get people in the room together and very rare.
Yeah.
Okay. So you have to choose carefully when you do it and how you do it.
Yeah. In order to, again, not create the fatigue around, oh God, I've got to spend another 3 hours doing a post-it exercise with HR.
Yes. Okay. So from the entrepreneurial perspective, how is risk managed?
For an what do you mean from an entrepreneur?
So we talked before about the organisation has many other competitors who are all looking at the same market, and clearly there's a lot of risk in the business you do, flying people from place to place safely. So how is the organisation managing that risk? How does it approach risk?
Very carefully and with a lot of respect.
Yes.
I think. Competition will always be important. I mean, no publicly listed business is not going to want to deliver results to the city, but there is no way that we will deliver results to the city if we're not safe. And so I think the way that risk is managed is by recognising it and talking about it, and I think being respectful of it is probably the best way to describe it, is always giving time to consider risk, whether that's people risk, whether that's financial risk or technical risk, whatever that may be. It's a much larger part of the daily vernacular here than it has been in any other organisation I've worked for.
Okay, all right. Fascinating. So what is it that potentially slows down growth of your business?
Our agility as an organisation. I can't remember whether I said the word unwieldy, but it can be unwieldy at times because of the size of it, and because it has grown so much over an extended period of time,
yes,
organically and through acquisition. There is, for example, a part of the business which has been was acquired a while ago. We owned part of it, and then we fully they became a full subsidiary of us about 4 or 5 years ago. And fundamentally, they still operate as their own business, their own systems, their own communication structure, their own leadership, etc. And that can create challenge.
Okay, all right. So, from a coaching and mentoring view, does your organisation develop managers by coaching and mentoring?
Not as much as they could. There is, I think, and I'm being careful of my words here, not to be diplomatic, but because I think this is endemic. There is, I've not come across any organisation where particularly senior managers who've been in the business a long time and have that level of tenure within one organisation. They may have been mentored by individuals in the organisation, but it's very rare that you come across someone who has been properly coached. Okay. And by properly coached, I mean coached by someone who understands what it is that they are doing and are doing it intentionally.
Yes.
I think there happen to be a small pocket of wonderful leaders who, and I call them leaders deliberately, who naturally have a very coaching style. But I also think that the organisational design and structure hasn't necessarily driven that, because with the level of hierarchy and the level of, because of the risk, the level of sign-off processes that everyone has to go through for a technical piece to be delivered, for example, the coaching approach or mentality, which typically would be, giving someone more freedom, more opportunity to do continuous improvement. There are areas, especially in the safety aspect, we don't want them to do their own thing. Yeah. We want them to comply. So I don't think necessarily the kind of the context of the organisation, the size of the organisation, the legacy of it have been set up for that. Equally, there's been a very strong focus on the importance of coaching and mentoring for our emerging talent programmes coming through.
Yes.
So I think probably there's this poor forgotten mid-manager level who kind of just missed that recognition and understanding and shift in HR, really, which kind of happened sort of late 80s through to the early 2000s, towards the coaching approach. who haven't had access to that. But our emerging talent programs are all assigned a coach for professional development. So, for example, if they're going through the IMACE or if they want to become chartered, they have a particular mentor and or coach who's associated with that. They have a coach who is associated with the graduate population in general, so there will be one person for perhaps 40 individuals who is there as a sounding board if they need them.
Okay.
But I wouldn't necessarily say that it's formal.
So, and that leads me on to ask about how that is part of the development of leaders and leadership in the company.
So there's quite a distinct split between technical leaders and people leaders, and actually that recognition I do think is quite rare in the engineering industry especially. Ever so often you come across technical specialists who are wonderful at what they do and have no interest in developing other people, which is fine, in a people leadership role, because that's the only way that promotion or salary increase or increased responsibility has been structured. So they do have some very defined career paths which allow you to associate more with one than the other if that's your wish. Sorry, I've forgotten the question now.
So this is how far has the coaching and mentoring become part of your leadership development?
So I think I would probably say, and with limited visibility, admittedly, I would probably say that in the technical area you tend to see more mentoring. It's more approach of more of an approach from a leadership perspective of this is how I would do it. These are the types of resources you can use. A guidance to specific resources. Whereas I would say in the people leadership side, certainly the external courses, etc., are more focused on let's look inwards, let's look at you, let's look at how you need to develop, let's ask you questions and allow you to get to that level of understanding yourself.
So there's different needs for different types of people.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, all right.
All right, guys. I particularly want us to watch that video because the lady spoke about Rolls-Royce's approach to strategic communication, which is part of what you are expected to do in your reports. So that's why we want us to look at it and how they have managed to introduce creativity into that. Okay, so how can creative thinking be of use to the consultancy process? Look at the problem from the perspective. You can look at the problem from the perspective of using the 6 R's, work within the set resources, create, develop a sustainable solution, use creative techniques to critically develop a solution that is measured against success criteria and takes as divergent a view as possible to find a possible option, then choose an option that meets the criteria. Now, let's talk about manager and leaders. The difference between managers and leaders lies in the conception they hold deep in their psyches of chaos and others. Manager embrace process seeking stability and control and instinctively try to resolve problems quickly and sometimes before they fully understand a problem's significance. On the other hand, leader tolerates chaos and lack of structure and are willing to delay closure in order to understand issue more fully. And these, we can see, these are some of the differences between manager and leaders. In terms of manager, they are task-oriented, they are transactional in nature, they do things right, and they are more of they respond to event and task, rational thinking. They instruct people, cognitive intelligence, relies on authority. They lean towards push approach, and they like to maintain status quo. In terms of manager, in terms of leaders, they are people oriented and they are transformational in nature. They do the right things and they focus on attitudes and behaviors, inspirational and the visionary. They listen and empowers employees or subordinates. Uh, Emotional intelligence, they are more of emotional intelligence. They lead through others. They ask people. They lean towards push approach and they like to take risk. Uh, let's look, let's look at these. Who can best promote creativity in an organization? A manager or a leader? And I need you to justify your answer. The second one is how can the manager become an effective leader? The first one is who can best promote creativity in an organization? Is it a manager? Is it a leader? And provide reason for your answer. How can a manager become an effective leader? I'm going to give you 10 minutes to think about that and provide your answer. Is that okay?
Yeah, yes, it's fine.
Guys, who's gonna go first?
I can start.
Yeah,
So for me, I said I think a leader can best promote creativity
yeah.
because they like inspire and empower people. They encourage new ideas, while a manager mainly focuses on rules and processes.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then for the second question, I said that a manager can become an effective leader by encouraging new ideas, supporting teamwork, listening to people, and focusing on vision and purpose, not just rules and tasks.
Thank you, Cosmina. Mohammed?
Yes, Professor. So, even me, I agree with Cosmina, and I think to best promote creativity in an organization, it would be a leader because a manager will be always like busy with the not to promote creativity because they are always what to say um, focused on the company's growth in numbers and not with the employees. And also, to a manager to become an effective leader, they should think with the perspective of an employee and address their issues with the best solutions. That's it. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Cosmina Mohammed. I think the best person to promote creativity in organization, if one has to choose between manager and leader, will be will be leader, and the reason is because leader allow people to try things and they don't punish people for their mistakes, and that is what that's one of the things that promotes creativity. Thank you. Uh, in 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 um in consultancy, communication is really important, and the concept of communication is that a message is sent through a channel. The channel could be text message, it could be email, it could be chat, it could be video conferencing, phone call, it could be forum posting, it could be any of those. And so there will be a message, there will be a sender, there will be channel through which the message is sent. And of course, there will be a receiver who then try to decode the message, who try to interpret the message, and they will also give feedback to the sender. Please note that the channel, the message is not complete. Is not completed without feedback. Uh, Cantley and Strebler identified the following key soft skills for leadership in terms of communication: gaining trust, developing people, encouraging and empowering others, nurturing effective relationship, communicating and influencing, working with new information, concepts and strategies, managing people effectively, seeking and using feedback, tenacity, and integrity. Uh, So the workshop for the assessment, we actually start the workshop for assessment before the class. We did that in the morning when we got in the morning. We talked about that. So let's talk about change. When we say change, it refers to the act of making something different. Out of making something different or the process of becoming different. It can It can be described as an alteration, or transformation, such as change in the mood or the weather, or substitution like changing clothes or a vehicle, make someone or something different from its original form. To alter, change can also be described as to alter or modify or replace something with something else, or to substitute one thing for another. Change is synonymous with concepts such as transformation, development, metamorphosis, transmutation, evolution, regeneration, innovation, revolution, and transition. You realize all of these words means changing from one form to another. When we say organizational change, the only constant thing within an organization is change. So the only thing constant within an organization is continual change of organizations. Organizational change is the continuous improvement of organizational structure, strategy, capability. In fact, some aspect of culture is also subject to continuous change in order for an organization to meet the evolving need of both external and internal stakeholders. So organizational change is the partial or total adaptation of a new idea, concept, or behavior by organizational members. Organization visions and mission statement, organization strategy, organizational culture, as I've mentioned, organizational structure, system, techniques of production, and leadership style are some of the targets of organizational change. So when we say change management, is the process of continually renewing an organization direction, structure, and capabilities to serve the ever-changing needs of external and internal customers. Organizational change refers to the action in which a company or business alters a major component of its organization, such as the culture, technologies, of infrastructure it uses to operate, or its internal process. So organizational change management is the process of building organizational change to a successful resolution, and it typically includes three major phases, which is the preparation, implementation, and follow through. Let's watch this short video about inner side of organizational change.
I'm rarely speechless.
You work hard for your money. Now let it work for you.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name again is Thijs Homan. I'm a professor in change management, but I am what we call a critical scientist. So my opening sentence would be, the more you try to manage change, the more it comes to a halt. That is my basic principle. And the second one is that a lot of change in organizations is going on in spite of change management. So I'm a very critical scientist, trying not to go along with the hypes, but really look beneath the surface about what is going on in organizations. So first let me show the way I was announced on the internet. Apparently I am going to talk about how schools can transform smoothly. And that is exactly what I am not going to talk about. Because this assumes that there is a change which is needed, and there is someone managing the change, and that someone is managing the change in such a way that it is going to be smoothly. And the dream of managers is, of course, that people are changing without them knowing it. Yeah, that's the ideal. But I think change is never smoothly, nor can it be managed. So that's what I'm going to talk about. I don't think it's relevant, and don't expect all kinds of solutions about how to change people in organizations, because I think that is not the reality what is going on in schools and organizations. But first, I want to...
This is Paradise.
Talk about a reflective perspective about how can I understand change and how do I look at change in organizations. And again, also in the preparation, people ask me, okay, what is your takeaway message? What do you advise people? I don't give takeaways and I do not give interventions and ideas about what to do. I want to talk about what are our assumptions, why we think that way of talking and doing is so relevant for us. So that's what I'm going to do together with you. Let me talk about education a little bit. I walk around in that sector quite often, and there, of course, are many things going on over there. And I assume that also today, some of those themes are presented in talks and sessions and so on. But all these themes, I would think, are what we call the content side of change. And I do not want to talk about the what of change, but about the how of change. And in many organizations, what my experience is that people talk a lot about the what, how can we do blended learning, and what kind of systems do we need. And after we know what we want to do, then we're going to talk about change. And usually the change paragraph is the thinnest paragraph in the plan. But I think it is the most important one, and that's why I'm a professor in that field. But I'm going to talk about the how of that side. Typically, the whole idea, classical idea about change management, like a smooth transition, is that I intend something as a teacher or director of a school or member of the board, and I devise a plan, and then I do the right things, the right interventions, and I involve everybody, and we have nice sessions and speeches and inspirational moments. And when I do that correctly, there is a straight line towards the goal which I intended and which I wrote down in my plan before I started. So this assumes that changing people in organizations is like doing the right interventions, and then the things are going to happen which I hoped they were going to happen. But when you look at the reality, what this means is that managers who are working from this perspective have an intense need for tools and techniques. And of course, the whole consultancy industry is thriving on that need, but
I'm rarely speechless.
Lemon Markets, for those who want more.
Typical question is, what should I do? And that means, what kind of interventions can I do? Appreciative inquiry, large-scale interventions, process sessions, inspirational sessions. So maybe you would also expect from me that I would say, okay, this is how you have to change your school. As if I could say that here standing on the red dot. But the basic assumption here is, when I, as a manager, do the right thing, they predictably will go into the right direction. That's the basic assumption for this way of looking. But my experience on the bottom side is that change projects are not so smooth, even though the nicest interventions are rolled out. And from research, it's a very known fact that almost 70 to 80% of the planned change project fail. And I think even the percentage is even higher. But my most prominent question is, and that is what I still not understand, why do we continuously go on with managing change in this way when we also know, it is scientifically proven, that it does not work? And for me, that is a dilemma I'm still thinking about. But the typical reaction on a failed change project, so we change the structure of our school, the people don't change, so what we do is we start another change project, for instance, on behavior or culture or things like that, using exactly the same assumptions about change for the structural project, which apparently failed. So for me, I don't understand it. But this question more or less triggered me to think about what are our assumptions, what are we assuming when we are doing change management in the conventional way we are used to do it. And I would like to draw your attention to two different perspectives on sets of assumptions. And the one is monocentric change, and that assumes that change is managed or triggered from one sender, and that is the change management. Or I have a polycentric development that where I say change is coming from everywhere. and it is not exactly managed by one specific person or party. So I would like to start out with the monocentric perspective, and you will recognize this. I call this the sender perspective. This assumes the manager has to do the right things, the right sessions, the right interventions, and then all what we call the noses are going to stand in the right direction. So that assumes first the manager does something, and then the noses will change. Assuming this way of thinking, the manager is the one who moves the unearthed math. So the assumption is that the organization is not changing, is inert, and that the manager is the one who has to create movement. And of course, once it is created, the manager has to monitor progress and correct things when they are not going in the right way. Oh, sorry. And but excuse me, there was a sorry.
So the guy actually spoke about some of the inner side of change, which makes it really, really difficult. It's not that easy as it seems, as it sounds. He mentioned some of the reasons why it's difficult and what can be done about that. So these are some of the triggers of change. Triggers of change could be internal. What triggers of change mean? What causes change? It could be internal, it could be external, that put pressure on employee organization to change. Some of those triggers could be technology, could be merger and acquisition when companies struggle financially, so they could be forced to change by merging or by even selling the company, the organization as a whole. It could be leadership, could be changing customer demands, could be financial challenges, could be changing government policy, competitive innovation. It could be activities of competitors, could be natural and environmental factor. And when this happens, organization would be required to change. There are different types of change. There's what we call planned and emergent change. There is episodic and continuous change. We have developmental change. We have transitional change, adaptive change, and we have remedial change. Leading and managing change through consultancy involve using expert consultants to guide the organization through complex transformation by creating structured plans, facilitating communication, engaging employees, and providing ongoing support to ensure successful adoption of new processes, technologies, and structure. This approach helps mitigate resistance, align people with strategic goals, and build a resilient, agile organization capable of sustaining change. And these are the key aspects of change management, consultancy. We have strategic guidance, where consultants help identify areas needing transformation and develop tailored strategy to achieve organizational goal. We have planning, structured planning, the design, consultants design comprehensive change programs, mapping out realistic timeline and clearly defining objectives. And we have communication. Consultants develop and implement effective communication, usually two-way communication plans to inform staff about the rationale for change and its impact. One of the reasons for that is to get all the staff on their side so that it's going to be successful. Resistance will be very, very minimal. Stakeholder engagement, they actively work to engage employees and leadership, gather feedback through surveys and focus groups, and ensure everybody feel heard, everybody feel part of it. And resource allocation and training, consultants identify resource need and ensure staff receive the necessary training budget and tools to succeed in the new environment. Managing resistance, which I mentioned earlier on, by understanding the human element of change, consultants address potential points of resistance, which are common with new system and processes. An ongoing support and assessment, they provide continuous support, monitor progress, gather feedback, and make adjustments where necessary to the plan to ensure the change is sustained, is successful and sustained. So change approach are different, are the different strategies for managing and implementing change in an organization. So there are different change approaches that can be used, and this include it include Kota 8-step model. We have Lewin's change model, and we have also ADKAR change model. This is what the Kota 8-step model looks like. The model focuses on creating urgency, forming a guiding coalition, communicating a vision, and empowering action, and embedding change to create momentum for large-scale transformations. The process continues with communicating the vision widely, removing obstacles, generating short-term wins to build momentum, and build on those successes, and finally anchoring the new approach in the company's corporate culture to make it stay, to make it stick. Let's watch this short video about the Kota's 8-step.
I'm gonna get a prototype.
The hardest thing is to get started.
It's the ideas and the choice of which ones to flesh out that I think are very human discipline.
We have started to deal with computers in higher and higher levels of abstraction.
Just push a button.
Rapid prototyping allows you to identify what's important early on.
People then end up spending more time.
John Kotter developed his 8-step model for leading change in his 1996 bestseller, Leading Change. Although there have been some changes in terminology over the years since 1996, the constant research that his team has carried out has continued to endorse the basic principles of Kotter's 8-step model. So in this video, I want to answer the question, what is John Kotter's 8-step process model for leading change? Although I still regularly refer to John Kotter's original leading change, his terminology has changed. So in this video, I will be using the terminology from his more recent 2014 book, Accelerate. So what are the 8 steps? First, we need to create a sense of urgency.
I'm rarely speechless.
Second, build a guiding coalition. And third, form a strategic vision and initiatives. These first 3 steps create the platform for change. Fourth is enlist a volunteer army. Fifth, enable action by removing barriers. And sixth, enable short-term wins. This second set of 3 steps creates an empowered cadre of employees within the organization. The 7th step is to sustain acceleration, and the 8th step is to institute change. And it's these last 2 steps that really do create the change. So let's look at these 8 steps in a little bit more detail. First, create a sense of urgency. First, we need to ensure that people recognize the need for change. This is for 2 reasons. First, we need to motivate them to start to let go of the past. And secondly, we need to enthuse them to actively participate in the changes that are happening. Whilst fear is a hugely powerful motivator that can get people moving and start to release their grip on the past, it is not sustainable. For a sustainable change program, you also need to craft a highly compelling vision of the future that will draw people forward rather than push them away from the past and leaving them feeling fearful and perhaps freeze them psychologically. Step 2. Build a guiding coalition. Your guiding coalition is a team that understands the need for change and is committed to taking a leadership role in delivering it. Ideally, you need to form a guiding coalition that spans every dimension of the organisation, every function, every division, every region, and every demographic within your organisation. That way, it will be seen as having legitimacy, as well as having the contacts it needs throughout the organisation to make real progress. Step 3. Form a strategic vision and initiatives. This step combines articulating what you want and putting together a practical plan for how you're going to achieve it. This is work for the guiding coalition or the change leadership team. They need to develop this vision and they need to start to build a plan for how they're going to deliver it. Step 4. Enlist a volunteer army. The guiding coalition on its own are not going to be enough people. You need the numbers if you're going to really make the change stick. A volunteer army will be able to share the load, and they will also be able to create the momentum you need to drive change throughout the organisation. This means communicating your vision effectively and harnessing the enthusiasm that you create as you create it to build a movement that is going to drive the change and create the real adoption that you need at the grassroots level. Step 5. Enable action by removing barriers. You need to remove every possible barrier of policy and procedure and unproductive behaviours and mindsets. Organisations often find themselves in a siloed mentality where someone from this part of the organisation can't get things done in another part of the organisation. It's one of the reasons why your guiding coalition has to span the whole organisation. But you also need authority from the top to suspend the crazy rules and regulations that will get in the way of making the change really happen. It also means giving real power to your guiding coalition. And it means the guiding coalition delegating or devolving that power down to their volunteer army. Step 6. Generate short-term wins. Success motivates, and it also proves a point. It's hard to say this won't work.
This is Ahmed. Sofa, snacks, remote. Life's good. Ahmed! Here we go again.
If it just has. Look for opportunities to succeed, to create conspicuous successes, and then recognize them, communicate them, and celebrate them so that the rest of the organization can find out about them. Small targets, quick wins, easy wins, they are important, but they are also seductive. Don't over-focus on them, otherwise they will distract your attention from doing the bigger, more important things. As in all things, balance is vital. Step 7. Sustain acceleration. The need to sustain progress means that you have to pace yourself and pace your team. It's the guiding coalition who need to determine what that pace is, and they need to understand the importance of crafting resilience within the organisation as well as constant progress. This means building a culture of change into the organisation. It also means recognising the difference between change after change and change upon change. Change upon change, when you're trying to do more than one thing at once and it's all building up, is enormously disruptive. But creating change, and then as it starts to stabilise, looking for the next opportunity, that's how we create sustainability. Step 8. Institute change. The final step is about locking the changes into the culture. You need to do all of the work it takes to make the changes really stick. That means looking beyond the simple things like a little bit of behavioural change here and a little bit of policy change there, but overhaul everything you do to make the changes integral to the new way that the organisation works. Project management and change management are two ends of a spectrum. I have a whole video about that idea. And therefore, as a result, it is impossible to be a project manager without in some ways involving yourself in organisational change. And if you're going to learn just one model for how organisational change takes place and how to make it work, then you can't do any better really than John Kotter's 8-step process for leading change.
Okay, that's the 8th step explained. The second one is Lewin's models of change. The Lewin's model of change is a 3-stage framework for managing organizational change. The model was conceptualized by a social psychologist called Kurt Lewin, and it involves unfreezing the existing situation to prepare for change, changing to implement new ideas and processes, and refreezing to stabilize the new ways of working. The model uses an analogy of melting a block of ice, changing its shapes, and then refreezing it to form a new solid shape, emphasizing that change is a process that must be properly navigated to become permanent. So in the unfreeze, you recognize the need for change, you determine what actually needs to be changed, encourage the replacement of old behavior and attitude, you ensure there is strong support from management, and you manage and understand the doubts of and concerns of the people. Then the step 2 is the change itself. You plan the change, you implement the changes, and you help employees to learn new concepts or point of view. And the last stage is refreeze. You change are reinforced and stabilized, and integrate change into the normal ways of doing things. You develop ways to sustain the change and celebrate success. Another short video for Lewin's model. Let's watch it.
All I want is a home and I get 100 options. My heart wants the best view.
Kurt Lewin's freeze phases is one of the models that every change agent and project manager needs to be aware of. Lewin was one of the first people to systematically study how change works, yet his model remains valid. So, a good understanding of Lewin's freeze phases is important for every project manager whose project is likely to create organisational or cultural change. So in this video, we'll answer the question, what are Kurt Lewin's freeze phases? The need for change in our organisations will never end, and therefore the ability to steer our organisations and their people through the changes is one of the principal challenges for organisations and for their managers, and of course for project managers. So, what is the process to support people through change? What are the stages they go through, and how do we guide them? This is a question that was addressed by Kurt Lewin, one of the principal psychologists of the 20th century. Among many contributions to our understanding of organisational life, Lewin gives us a 3-stage model of how change works, which has come to be called the freeze phases model. But Lewin's first observation was that we are all subject to a number of forces within our environment. There are driving forces which propel us towards change, and there are restraining forces which hinder our adoption of that change. This gives rise to Lewin's idea of force field analysis. Importantly, the restraining forces consist of 2 types. First, there is our inward resistance to change, which is deep and psychological. And second, there is our more shallow need to conform to the norms of our society and our comfort with the existing norms with which we conform. Before we can change then, we need to overcome these restraining forces. We need to overcome our resistance and our desire to conform with what we believe are the current norms of our organisation or our society. Therefore, Lewin named the first of his phases of change unfreezing. And in the unfreezing stage, we're starting to loosen up these established patterns of behaviour and thought. We are recognising that change has to happen. The way we do this is that we challenge established beliefs, established ideas, even established values, and we start to recognise that there are alternatives. This is not trivial because resistance is powerful. It's almost as if we are wired to resist change, largely because of the comfort we feel in our existing situation and the fear we feel for what is coming. However, the more we're exposed to new ideas and new possibilities, the looser our affiliation to the existing status quo is, and we start to unfreeze. Lewin's second phase is changing, and this is where we can lead people from the status quo ante, the way things were before, to the new, changed environment and the new way of doing things. If we're going to guide them well, however, we need to recognise that this is a time of great uncertainty for people. This uncertainty is going to come back in waves, causing new levels of resistance. And so it's rarely a simple movement from A to B. What we are more likely to see is levels of commitment that peak and trough. And sometimes people want to move back the way they'd come. Other times they're eager to move forward. Strong leadership is vital during the changing phase, because this tendency of people's commitment to go up and down and for the resistance to grab hold of them means that weak leadership will make people susceptible to other influences, which is why we observe that things like gossip and rumour are so powerful in times of change. In the absence of a good, effective and strong leader, people will follow anyone who seems to have an answer for them, even if that answer isn't in the long term good for them. Eventually, however, people will reach a new understanding and they will start to adopt some of the new ways of working. They will be reaching the end of the changing phase and entering the freezing phase or the refreezing phase, because now we are refreezing them into a new status quo, into a new way of being. During the refreezing phase, people start to understand the new ways of working and they start to look for ways to take advantage. They will settle into it and find their own balance. Of course, for some people, the changes are not good. They will look at the new way of working, they will look at the new situation they find themselves in and recognise that it is not right for them. For those people, the refreezing stage is more about stepping away from the new, changed environment into something radically different. They're going to go into a bigger and more fundamental change, possibly leaving the organisation altogether and possibly even changing their whole lifestyle.
All I want is a home and I get 100 options. My heart wants the best view.
So Lewin's model is really simple. First of all, we have to unfreeze from the way we did things before, then we have to change to the new way of doing things, and then we have to refreeze by becoming familiar and adopting the new norms of the new ways of doing things. Now, it's important to note that Lewin's use of the term phases suggested to many people that these were 3 static stages in the process. In truth, what's really going on is a continuum, a movement from one thing to another in a fluid way. This perhaps contributed to a diminution of the use of Lewin's freeze phases. It is, after all, around 100 years old as an idea. It's easy to think that Lewin's freeze phases have no more value for us, they've dropped out of use, but it couldn't be farther from the truth. Because Lewin's freeze phases were picked up by William Bridges, and his books Transitions and Managing Transitions, about personal change and organisational change, use a very similar 3-stage model. he describes the 3 stages as letting go, the neutral zone, and new beginning. And his books are now 40 years old, but receive constant reprints. The newest edition of Transitions, the 40th anniversary edition, is very recent, and a couple of years earlier we saw a new edition of Managing Transitions. So Lewin's ideas are very current. And they're very current because they work. They explain how people transition, they explain the changes that people go through, and therefore they give us good guidance as project managers and leaders of change into how to facilitate the process of organisational change and to take people along the journey. Please do give a thumbs up if you like this video. I'll be making loads more great projects.
Okay, so let's have the last one, which is ADCA change model. The ADCA model the ADCA model is a change management framework by Jeff Ayers. It outlines the 5 essential stages for successful individual change, which is awareness, that is the need for change, the desire to participate and support the change, knowledge, that is knowledge of how the change is going to unfold, ability to implement the change, and reinforcement to sustain the change. These outcome-oriented model helps organization to guide employees through the change process, minimize resistance, and ADCA change model also ensure that new behavior become lasting in organization. And finally, let's watch the video for ADCA change model.
All I want is a home and I get 100 options. My heart wants the best view.
In this video, I want to answer the question, what is ADCA? ADCA is a 5-step model of how people respond to change. It's a handy way to understand how people in your organization will respond to changes that will allow you to plan the change process more effectively, and also to understand what's going on when people respond so that you can adapt appropriately. ADCA is a copyrighted and protected model, so I need to be a little careful and limited in what I say to ensure that I remain both ethically and legally within the guidelines of fair use. However, you can learn a lot about ADCA both from the website of its owners, the Prosky organisation, or indeed from the book that introduced ADCA to the world. ADCA, a model for change in business, government and our community, was written by Jeff Hyatt, the founder of Prosky, and I will put a link to the book in the description to this video. The name ADCA comes from the 5 outcomes that an individual needs to achieve if change is to be successful. ADCA stands for awareness, desire, knowledge, ability, reinforcement. Awareness is all about understanding the need for change. Desire is then about feeling the wish, the will, the commitment to engage with the need for change and to make a change yourself. Knowledge is not only knowledge of what the changes are, but of how I can adapt myself and make my own personal change. Ability is knowing that I can make the change and that I have the support and the guidance around me to help me be successful. And reinforcement is all about working to sustain the change and thrive through the availability of things like feedback and performance metrics and recognition from the organisation and the people around me. As a result, we can see ADCA as a 5-step change process, not dissimilar from many others, but particularly well crafted, It's widely used, particularly in US headquartered organizations, for training people to understand the delivery of change. Because ADKAR is part of a suite of tools and models that Prosky offers commercially. They offer both consultancy and also training and certification in their methods and their tools. Incidentally, their website also offers a wealth of free resources. Now, I have no affiliation with Prosky. I haven't been trained formally in any of their methodologies, so I can't give an endorsement for them. But what I do know is that people I've met who have had the training and have talked about it seem not only excited by what they've learned, but to have found it useful. There is, however, no substitute for doing your own evaluation, and I would start with the free materials on their website. You can learn a lot from them, and I have done so. What I would say is the fact that this is so widely used, particularly in major corporates, that it does make it a solid proposition for a number of people. This includes project managers who want a solid training and certification in change management. There are relatively few formal certification programs available. It's also valuable for organizations planning to go through a major change and who want to ensure that a large number of staff are trained to a consistent and high level in understanding change and how it works. And of course, learning the ADKAR model and some of the other methodologies around it is going to be very useful for anyone who plans to specialize in change management. As I said in an earlier video, I view project management and change management as two ends of one spectrum, two disciplines that are part of a wider discipline and share a set of tools, models, ideas, resources, and processes. You may choose to play at one end of the spectrum or another, but in reality, understanding both ends of the spectrum needs to be a priority for you if you want to be successful at either end. And of course, if you want change management training, but with less formality and without any certification and at a significantly lower price, do take a look at my course in managing and leading change. It is designed for project managers who want to understand the change management process to a level of depth, who want to know what the underlying psychology is, but are not prepared or able to go to the expense and commitment of a formal course. But as a project manager, it does pay not just to understand the basics of change management, but to know a little bit about some of the principal tools and models and approaches. And ADKAR is without a doubt one of the best, and certainly one of the best known and most widely used. Please.
All right, guys. So let's have this final exercise. What are the most appropriate tools for change and why? We've discussed three. Which one do you think is the most appropriate and why do you think so? I'm just going to give you 10 minutes to do that and we'll discuss in 10 minutes. Is that okay?
Yes.
All right, guys. Cosmina, can we hear from you?
For the for the question, so it depends what kind of change.
Yeah.
But if I have to choose one, I will take the Kotter's 8-step process.
Yeah.
Because it gives the clearest, most detailed roadmap for managing change from the start to finish. So it focuses on building urgency, involving people, communicating well, removing obstacles, and making the change sticks. So that's why it's effective for organizations that face big changes.
Thank you, Cosmina. Mohammed?
Yes, Professor. As Cosmina mentioned, it depends purely on what type of change you're looking for. Yeah, we can go with quarters, or it's okay with also ADCAS model. I think ADCAS is more appropriate, which focus on individual level change, and it also helps HR diagnose why employees are resisting to any issues. Also ensures people have the skills and motivation to adopt the change. So I think it's overall best for technology rollout and new HR systems, behavioral change. Yeah, that's it.
Thank you. Absolutely fantastic. It depends. I mean, either of them is good, or in other words, all of them is good, depending on the kind of change that you are trying to make in organization, and depending on the person who is a change manager who is trying to make the change. So depend on these two, and of course, depend on the kind of change you are trying to make. That brings us to the end of the module. Do you have any question? Any question? Any comment?
No questions from me.
Mohammed, any question? Okay.
Nothing, sir.
Thank you, guys. Thank you very much. The assessment guide is already uploaded on the module, and the time of submission, everything is there. Please make sure you engage with that and start doing your assessment from today so that you can submit on the due date. Thank you very much for being part of this. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Have a good day.